Crisp German air bit at Private Presley's cheeks as he stepped out of the morning chill and into Barracks 104. It was early 1959, and the world knew him as Elvis, the king of rock and roll. But here in the U.S. Army, stationed in Freiburg, Germany, he was just another soldier, a private among privates, folding his uniform with the rest, scrubbing floors and pulling guard duty. He was determined to be treated no differently to earn his stripes like anyone else, not coast on his fate. The barracks itself was a stark reminder of Army life's realities. Drab green walls, bunk beds lined up in neat rows, footlockers at attention. It smelled of stale coffee, sweat, and cheap cleaning supplies. Most days, the air hung heavy with a sense of quiet resignation, a dull ache of homesickness that settled deep in the bones of young men, far from their families, their sweethearts, their familiar worlds. One of the few attempts at communal comfort was a television set perched precariously on a wobbly stand in the recreation room. It was an ancient contraption, a hulking beast of a machine with a tiny curved screen that flickered more than it displayed actual images. The antenna looked like a broken clothes hanger taped together with various shades of electrical tape. Each strip a testament to a desperate attempt to coax a watchable picture from the ether. Night after night, a dozen or more soldiers would cram into the small rec room, craning their necks, squinting through the static, and the ghostly double images. They'd watch whatever was on, usually some grainy American Forces network broadcast, or occasionally a German show they barely understood, relying on body language and a few shared German phrases. The sound was usually a muffled rumble like distant thunder, punctuated by sudden bursts of screeching feedback that made everyone wince. "Ah, come on, you hunk of junk," Private Miller grumbled one evening, giving the side of the TV a frustrated thump with his palm. The picture swam, then resolved itself into an even blurrier green-tinged mess. "Can't we just get a new one? This thing's older than dirt." A chorus of tired agreements followed. "Tell me about it." Private Johnson sighed, leaning back against the wall, rubbing his temples. "My grandma's got a better picture on her old radio." Elvis watched from his usual spot, leaning against the doorframe, a quiet observer. He wasn't a huge TV watcher himself, but he noticed the ritual. He saw how the men huddled together, yearning for that connection to the outside world, that small escape from the monotony of Army life. He saw the flicker of hope in their eyes when a show started, and the slump of disappointment when the screen inevitably went black, or the static became unbearable. He remembered the huge, clear screens he had back home, the vibrant colors, the crisp sound. The contrast was stark, almost painful. Here these young men, doing their duty, sacrificing so much, were trying to find comfort in a broken relic. It wasn't just about watching a show, it was about shared laughter, about forgetting where they were for an hour, about feeling connected to something bigger than the barracks walls. He saw the lines of fatigue around their eyes, the slumped shoulders, the forced cheerfulness that sometimes barely masked their weariness. He heard the quiet sighs, the frustrated exclamations. The old TV wasn't just old, it was a symbol of their low morale, a constant reminder of what they didn't have. Elvis found himself feeling a deep, unfamiliar pang in his chest. It wasn't the kind of homesickness he felt for Memphis or his mother. It was an empathy for these guys, his bunkmates, his comrades. They deserved better. They deserved a moment of true comfort, a clear window to the world they'd left behind, a place where they could genuinely relax and forget the grime and the drills, even if just for a little while. He watched Private Jenkins trying to adjust the rabbit ears, his brow furrowed in concentration, as if coaxing the broken metal would magically fix the problem. It was a futile effort, one they all knew was futile. But they kept trying anyway, because what else was there? A quiet thought began to form in Elvis's mind, a small insistent hum that started in the back of his brain and slowly, steadily began to grow. He had just received his first full Army paycheck. It wasn't anything like the money he made from records or concerts, but it was his, and he suddenly knew exactly what he wanted to do with it. The idea felt strange, audacious even, but undeniably right. He just had to figure out how. Days turned into weeks, and Private Presley continued his quiet observations. He was good at it, a skill honed by years of studying crowds from a stage, understanding what made people tick. Here, in the close confines of Barracks 104, he saw the raw, unfiltered emotions of young men trying to navigate a world completely alien to them. He saw Private Martinez, a quiet kid from Texas, meticulously polishing his boots, his gaze distant, undoubtedly dreaming of dusty plains and family barbecues. He saw Corporal Schmidt, a burly mechanic from Chicago, writing letters home every night, his brow furrowed in concentration as he tried to put into words the strangeness of their new life. He heard the hushed phone calls to loved ones, the crackle of a distant voice trying to bridge an ocean. The television, or rather the lack of a properly functioning one, remained a focal point of their collective frustration. It wasn't just a luxury. It was a lifeline. On cold, rainy German evenings, when outdoor activities were canceled, the barracks felt more like a cage. The TV room was supposed to be a sanctuary. Instead, it was a source of constant irritation. "Man, I'd kill for a decent movie night," Private Johnson grumbled one evening, staring at the blurred image of a talk show host, whose head seemed to stretch to twice its normal size. Just one night without eye strain. "Tell me about it," Private Miller chimed in, tossing a crumpled magazine onto his bunk. "I tried watching the football game last Sunday, but the static was so bad, I thought the Germans were jamming our signals." He chuckled, but there was no real humor in it. Elvis lunging in their voices. They weren't asking for much, just a bit of normal, a touch of home. He saw how their shoulders slumped when the picture fizzled out completely, how they'd try to find something else to do, often just staring blankly at the ceiling. The shared boredom was palpable, a heavy blanket over the entire barracks. He noticed the camaraderie too, the way they tried to make the best of it. They'd joke about the TV's quirks, create imaginary characters out of the blurry figures, or make up their own dialogue when the sound cut out. But underneath the forced cheer, the longing was always there. During mail call, he'd hear them talk about letters from home. "My sister sent me a clipping from the paper," Private Jenkins announced one day, holding up a faded newspaper section. "Says they're showing Jailhouse Rock at the local cinema next week. Man, I miss movies." Elvis felt a strange twist in his gut. Jailhouse Rock. His own movie playing back home, while here his fellow soldiers couldn't even get a clear picture of a news broadcast. It felt wrong. He had access to so much, and these guys who were going through the same thing as him side by side were making do with so little. He knew his salary wasn't huge by his standards, but compared to some of the guys who were sending most of their paychecks home to support families, it was substantial for a single man in the Army. He lived simply, didn't have many personal expenses beyond the occasional candy bar from the PX or a new book. The money was piling up. The thought that had sparked in his mind grew stronger. It wasn't just one TV that was needed, but perhaps a couple. The barracks was long with different sections. One TV for 50 men was never going to be enough, even if it worked perfectly. If he truly wanted to make a difference, to bring some genuine comfort, he needed to think bigger. He began to subtly ask questions disguised as casual conversation. "Anyone know where the guys usually get electronics around here?" he'd ask Private Johnson while polishing his boots. "The PX, mostly," Johnson replied, shrugging. "Their stock is usually pretty limited. Maybe the local German stores, but you need someone who speaks the lingo. And their prices can be steep." Elvis filed that information away. He needed the kind that would break down in a month. He needed quality, something that would last and truly make a difference. The more he thought about it, the more the idea felt less like a fleeting impulse and more like a necessary mission. He wasn't doing it for recognition. He didn't want anyone to know it was him. He just wanted to see a genuine smile on their faces. Unburdened by flickering screens and static, he wanted them to feel a little less lonely, a little more at home, even in this foreign land. The quiet resolve hardened in his heart. The post office on base was usually a hive of activity, but on this particular afternoon it was relatively quiet. Elvis stood in line, his heart thumping with a strange mix of anticipation and a familiar longing for home. When his name was called, it wasn't for a letter from Graceland, but for his bi-weekly Army paycheck. The crisp paper in his hand felt strangely heavy. It was a modest sum, especially compared to the multi-thousand-dollar checks he was used to. No endorsements, no royalties, just honest Army. Pay for honest Army work. For a moment, he thought of what he could do with it for himself. Maybe a new guitar, a nice civilian jacket for his rare leaves, or just saving it up for when he got out. But then he remembered the flickering screen, the resigned sighs, the quiet desperation for a clear picture. His mind immediately went back to Private Miller's exasperated grunt. "Can't we just get a new one?" And Private Johnson's wistful tone. "Man, I'd kill for a decent movie night." The words echoed in his head clearer than any TV signal in the barracks. The idea, which had been a gentle hum, now solidified into a powerful chord. He could do it. He could buy new TVs. Not just one, but enough for a few different sections of the barracks. It would be a significant chunk of his salary, perhaps even all of it from this paycheck. And maybe even a bit more from the next. But what was money for? To bring a little joy. He walked back to the barracks, the paycheck clutched in his hand, a plan forming in his mind. He didn't want any fanfare. He didn't want anyone to know it was him. He just wanted to see the look on their faces when they walked into the rec room one day and saw a brand new crystal clear screen. Would be an anonymous act of kindness, a gift from whoever. But then the practicalities hit him. How was he, Private Elvis Presley, supposed to go around buying multiple large television sets without drawing attention? He couldn't just stroll into the local German electronics store. Not as himself. His face was too recognizable. Even in Germany, the last thing he needed was a crowd or a media frenzy. He was trying to be a soldier, not a spectacle. And the logistics? How would he get them back to the barracks? He would need help. Someone he could trust completely, someone discreet, someone who understood the ins and outs of Army supply lines and local German vendors. He thought about the men in the barracks, who was reliable, who was quiet, who wasn't prone to gossip. His mind settled on Sergeant Davies, a gruff but kind supply sergeant, who had a knack for finding anything. Davies was a no-nonsense man, respected and most importantly kept to himself. He seemed to have connections everywhere. Elvis decided to approach him carefully. He'd frame it as a general morale booster, something for the guys, without revealing his personal stake or the full extent of his plan. He'd have to be convincing. He spent the rest of the afternoon and evening mentally calculating. A good TV wasn't cheap, especially for a soldier's salary. Could probably get a decent black and white set from the PX, but he wanted something better. Something that felt like a real upgrade, color if possible. And not just one, but maybe 2 or 3, that would truly spread the joy. He lay on his bunk that night staring at the ceiling, the numbers swimming in his head. It was a crazy idea maybe. His mother would probably scold him for spending so much of his hard-earned money on something for others, especially when he himself was living on Army pay. But he pictured their faces again, the tired eyes, the frustrated sighs. And then he imagined the surprise, the shock, the pure, unadulterated joy. The feeling in his gut intensified. It wasn't about the money. It was about making a difference, even a small one, in the lives of the men he shared this difficult experience with. He had so much more than he could ever really need. They had so little confined to this small world, far from everything they knew. A couple of TVs, clear and bright, might just be the window they needed. He drifted off to sleep, not to the sound of screaming fans or flashing cameras, but to the gentle snores of his bunkmates. The hum of his decision felt right, a quiet strength settling in his heart. The challenge now was to execute it without anyone ever knowing Private Elvis Presley was behind the biggest morale boost Barracks 104 had ever seen. The next morning, Elvis approached Sergeant Davies in the supply office. Davies was hunched over a stack of requisitions. His brow furrowed a half-eaten donut beside his elbow. The room smelled of old paper and dust. "Sergeant Davies, sir. Got a minute?" He needed to play this right. It's about the recreation room, you know. "The TV," Davies scoffed. "That old relic. Don't get me started. Things older than I am, and twice as temperamental." "Exactly." Sir Elvis nodded. "It's pretty bad, and morale, well, it's not exactly soaring on these cold nights. I was just thinking, wouldn't it be great if we could, you know, get a new one, or maybe a couple of them?" Davies raised an eyebrow. Curiosity piqued. "A new TV, huh? Easier said than done. Presley, we put in requisitions for new equipment, but the budget for recreational stuff is tighter than a drum." "I understand, sir," Elvis said quickly. "But what if the money wasn't from the Army? What if someone just wanted to contribute privately?" Davies leaned back in his chair, a shrewd look in his eye. He was a smart man, and he'd heard the whispers about Presley's substantial personal wealth. He also knew Elvis was trying to be just another soldier. "Someone, huh? And what would this someone be looking for, specifically?" Elvis took a breath. "Something good, Sergeant, not just a replacement, something that would really make a difference. Good picture, good sound, maybe even color if that's even possible. Over here, and maybe 2 or 3 of them, for different common areas." 2 or 3, huh? That's a serious chunk of change, Presley. And color TVs aren't exactly common in these parts, especially not for $1 million even from the German market. He paused, studying Elvis's earnest face. "And you want it private? No names? No thank yous? Just appear?" Elvis nodded emphatically. "Exactly, sir. Just a surprise for the guys, a little something to make their time here a bit easier." He didn't mention his salary or the fact that it would take most of it. He just hoped Davies understood the intent. Davies thought for a long moment, scratching his chin. He had seen the droop in morale, the quiet sadness in the barracks. A good TV, let alone several, would be a game-changer. And if someone was willing to foot the bill privately, it solved a lot of headaches. "All right, Presley," Davies said finally, a small smile playing on his lips. "That would be great, Sergeant. Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Davies warned. "This is going to be complicated. We'll need to make a trip off base, discreetly. And getting these things back here, well, they aren't exactly small. We'll need a vehicle, and we'll have to time it perfectly. Nobody can know what's going on until they're in place. You still up for that?" "Absolutely, sir," Elvis said, his eyes shining with determination. "Whatever it takes." "Good," Davies said, pushing his spectacles up his nose. "Meet me after evening mess by the main gate. Don't tell anyone and bring some cash, more than you think you'll need." He gave Elvis a look that said he knew exactly who this someone was, but he wasn't going to press it. "This is for the boys, right?" "For the boys," Sergeant Elvis confirmed, a genuine smile spreading across his face. The secret mission had officially begun. Later that evening, under the cloak of a German twilight, Elvis, dressed in civilian clothes he rarely got to wear, met Sergeant Davies by the main gate. Davies was already there, leaning against a beat-up military jeep, chewing on a toothpick. He didn't say much, just nodded towards the passenger seat. The ride was quiet, the jeep rattling along the cobblestone roads of Freeburg. Davies navigated the narrow streets with ease, his familiarity with the town evident. Eventually, they pulled up to a small, unassuming shop with a dimly lit sign that read, "Electronic Lorenz." Inside the shop was crammed with radios, record players, and a few boxy television sets. "A man with kind eyes and a thick mustache, Herr Lorenz," greeted Davies warmly. They exchanged a few rapid German phrases, then Herr Lorenz turned his gaze to Elvis, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. Quickly masked by professional courtesy, he was clearly a man who knew how to be discreet. Davies gestured. "This is Private Presley. He's the one I spoke to you about." Elvis offered a polite handshake. "Good to meet you, Herr Lorenz. Sergeant Davies says you might be able to help us out." Herr Lorenz smiled, a knowing glint in his eye. "Ja," Sergeant Davies explained. "You are looking for quality. Viewing for your comrades, I have just received a shipment of the newest models, American-made. Excellent picture. Even color, not many of them, very exclusive." He led them to the back of the shop where 3 large gleaming television sets sat, their screens dark but promising. They weren't massive, but substantial enough for the barracks. They looked modern, sleek, a world away from the old flickering relic they currently had. "These are top of the line," Herr Lorenz explained, patting one of the screens. "Sharp picture. Good. Sound they will make your barracks much brighter." Elvis's heart quickened. This was it. He looked at the price tags and his stomach did a little flip. Combined total was more than his entire last paycheck, even more than he had anticipated. It would empty his army savings, at least for now. For a moment, a tiny flicker of doubt danced in his mind. All that money for TVs? Then he remembered the tired faces, the longing in their eyes, the constant hum of frustration. He remembered the shared laughter he hoped they would have, the moments of escape. The doubt vanished, replaced by a firm resolve. "We'll take all 3, Elvis said, pulling out a thick wad of cash from his pocket. It was his entire current savings from his army pay. He felt a strange sense of liberation as he counted it out, handing it over to Herr Lorenz. The German shopkeeper's eyes widened slightly at the sheer amount, but he accepted it with a nod, counting quickly and accurately. "Excellent choice, Herr Lorenz," said a genuine smile now on his face. "These will serve your friends well." The next challenge was getting them back to the base without arousing suspicion. Davies had a plan. "We load them into the Jeep, one by one. I've got a tarp in the back. Make sure they're covered, and we'll go through the back gate. After hours less traffic, fewer questions." Loading the TVs into the Jeep was surprisingly difficult. They were heavier and bulkier than they looked. Elvis and Davies strained, grunting with effort, carefully maneuvering the boxes into the back of the Jeep, making sure they were cushioned and secured. Herr Lorenz provided extra blankets and ropes. Davies asked, wiping sweat from his brow, a faint smile on his lips. "This is quite the undertaking." "Never been more sure," Sergeant Elvis replied, his chest tight with a mix of exhaustion and exhilarating purpose. The money was gone, but the feeling of doing something truly good, truly selfless was worth far more. The drive back to the base was even more nerve-wracking. Every bump in the road, every approaching headlight made Elvis tense. He imagined a guard waving them down, asking questions, forcing them to reveal the surprise. But Davies was a master of discretion. He navigated the quiet back roads, avoiding patrols, and finally they slipped through a dimly lit service gate, barely glancing at the sleepy guard who waved them through. They drove directly to barracks 104, parking the Jeep behind the building, out of sight of most windows. The barracks was dark, most of the soldiers asleep in their bunks. "All right, Presley," Davies whispered, pulling out the tarp. "Phase 2. We get these inside, hidden, and then tomorrow morning we unveil the magic. You ready?" Elvis nodded, a grin spreading across his face in the dim light. "Ready as I'll ever be, Sergeant. Let's do this." The secret mission was nearing its climax, and Elvis felt a quiet thrill of anticipation. The barracks was a symphony of soft snores, creaking bunks, and the occasional cough. Outside, the German night was cold and silent. Inside barracks 104, however, Private Elvis Presley and Sergeant Davies were engaged in a quiet, strenuous operation. 3 new televisions, carefully unloaded from the Jeep, were now resting just inside the back door of the barracks, still in their sturdy cardboard boxes. Each one was remarkably heavy, a testament to their solid construction. Elvis grunted as he heaved the first box, inching it forward, trying to make as little noise as possible. Davies, surprisingly agile for his age and bulk, helped guide the boxes. His flashlight, a narrow beam in the darkness. Their target for the first TV was the main recreation room. The old, flickering behemoth still sat there, a silent challenge. Elvis had already made sure it was effectively out of commission. He'd accidentally unplugged it, then discovered a frayed wire, declaring it irreparable. Much to the collective disappointment of the soldiers, this left the stage perfectly set for its replacement. They slowly, methodically, maneuvered the first TV into the rig room. The floor was concrete, thankfully, so there wasn't much creaking. With a final push, they set the large box down against the wall near where the old TV used to sit. "One down, two to go," Davies whispered, wiping sweat from his brow. "Where do you want the others?" Elvis had planned this carefully. One in the lounge area at the far end of the barracks, by the reading nook. And the third maybe the officers' mess hall or another common room, if they have one that's equally used. He wanted to spread the cheer, not just concentrated in one spot. Davies nodded. "Good thinking. We'll put the second one in the lounge here. The third one I'll take care of. I can slip it into the smaller room in barracks 105 when it's empty, or the mess hall early morning. They're just as bad off as you guys, maybe worse, and it'll make it less obvious it all came from one place." The process was slow, muscles aching, but the excitement kept them going. Elvis felt a deep satisfaction with every quiet thud of cardboard against the floor. This was hard work, but it felt meaningful. As they finished placing the second TV, Elvis stood back, looking at the dark, silent boxes. Tomorrow these would bring light and sound and laughter. He thought about the men in their bunks, dreaming of home, or perhaps just enduring the night. Until reveille, he hoped this small act would make their days a little brighter, their evenings a little less lonely. Davies patted him on the shoulder. "Good work, Presley. Now let's get some sleep. Big day tomorrow." Elvis nodded, feeling a profound sense of peace settling over him. He knew he could have used that money for anything. A fancy car, a trip, new clothes. The thought of the joy he hoped to bring, the genuine smiles that would bloom on their faces, far outweighed any personal luxury. This was different. This was real. He slipped back into his bunk, the subtle scent of new electronics still clinging to his clothes. Closed his eyes, not thinking about the millions who adored him, but about the handful of men sleeping around him. He wasn't the king tonight. He was just Elvis, a soldier doing something for his brothers in arms. And in that moment it felt like the most important thing he had ever done. He drifted off to sleep, a quiet, hopeful smile on his face, eagerly anticipating the dawn. The morning began like any other, with the piercing blare of reveille cutting through the pre-dawn quiet. Soldiers groaned, stirred, and began their practiced military precision scramble to get dressed and ready for formation. The air was still chilly, and a thin fog clung to the ground outside the barracks windows. Private Johnson was the first to enter the recreation room after completing his morning routine. He shuffled in, rubbing sleep from his eyes, aiming for the worn-out couch, ready for a few minutes of quiet before breakfast. He stopped dead. His eyes, still blurry with sleep, blinked, then widened. Where the old defunct TV had sat, there now rested a sleek, new, surprisingly large, boxy model. This one looked futuristic, modern. He stared, thinking he was still dreaming. "Hey, gotta see this." Within moments, other soldiers, drawn by the unusual shout, began to trickle into the room. Private Miller, Private Jenkins, Corporal Schmidt, all stopped, their faces mirroring Johnson's shock. "What in the?" Miller whispered, slowly approaching the box. He reached out, a hesitant hand touching the smooth cardboard. "Is this a new TV?" "No way," Jenkins breathed, his jaw dropped. "They finally replaced the old monster." Elvis watched from the doorway, trying to blend into the background, a small, secret smile playing on his lips. He'd positioned himself perfectly to observe their reactions without drawing attention. Corporal Schmidt ever. The practical one carefully cut open the top of the box. He peeled back the flaps and the gleaming screen of a brand new television set was revealed. It was a beautiful thing, its surface reflecting the dim morning light. It even looked like it had a color screen. A gasp went through the room. "No way. It's a color TV. Look at that thing, it's massive." Quiet hum of disbelief quickly escalated into a joyous uproar. Men started pushing forward, eager to get a closer look. A touch, someone quickly found a power cord and an antenna wire. They plugged it in, and the screen flickered to life, displaying a crisp, clear test pattern. It was glorious. No static, no ghost images, just pure clean lines. "Oh my God, it works," someone shouted. "It's beautiful," another exclaimed, as if looking at a masterpiece. The transformation was immediate. The previously dull, sleepy rec room was suddenly alive with energy. Cheers erupted. High fives were exchanged. Smiles, genuine and wide, stretched across faces that usually held a weary expression. It was like sunshine had suddenly burst through the clouds. "But who bought it?" Private Martinez asked. Looking around, bewildered. "Must have been an angel," Miller joked, but his eyes were shining. "Maybe Santa Claus came early," Jenkins laughed. Elvis watched them, his heart swelling with a warmth that spread through his entire body. This was it. This was the payoff. Pure, unadulterated joy on their faces was worth every single penny, every aching muscle from moving the heavy boxes, every moment of secrecy. He saw men who had been dragging their feet minutes ago, now practically dancing. Later, as they ate breakfast, the new TV was the only topic of conversation. The buzz was electrifying. And as the day unfolded, the discovery of the second new TV in the lounge area sparked another wave of excitement, doubling the euphoria throughout the barracks. Sergeant Davies, meanwhile, had quietly installed the third TV in the barracks, 105 recreation room, creating a ripple effect of gratitude across the post. Elvis spent the day in a quiet euphoria, doing his duties, but every now and then catching a glimpse of a soldier, excitedly discussing the mystery TVs. He heard them make plans for movie nights, for watching the evening news, for tuning into sports. The barracks felt lighter, brighter, filled with a newfound sense of possibility and appreciation. He felt a deep, abiding satisfaction, the kind that money alone could never buy. He was just Private Presley, doing his duty, and quietly, anonymously bringing a little bit of Memphis magic to the German winter. The arrival of the new televisions sent a literal jolt through Barracks 104, and the ripple effects quickly spread across the entire post. The old, dreary rec room was now the most popular spot on base, perpetually occupied by soldiers, eager to experience clear, static-free viewing. The atmosphere had undergone a dramatic shift. The air was lighter, filled with laughter and easy conversation, instead of sighs of resignation. "Can you believe it?" Private Johnson exclaimed one evening, stretched out on the couch, watching a perfectly clear episode of The Ed Sullivan Show. "No more squinting, no more fiddling with those stupid rabbit ears. It's like Christmas came early," Miller agreed, shaking his head in wonder. "And who would have thought the Army actually sprung for something decent?" But the question lingered, a persistent whisper on everyone's lips. Who bought them? Speculation ran wild. Some insisted it had to be an official Army initiative, a secret budget surplus finally put to good use. Others, more cynical, believed it was a publicity stunt by some high-ranking officer. A few even theorized that a benevolent ghost haunted the barracks, leaving behind technological gifts. "Can't be from the Army," Corporal Schmidt argued, ever practical. "We've been asking for years, and they always say no. This thing just appeared overnight, someone bought it." And that's when the whispers about Elvis Presley started. He was, after all, the famous one, the one with money. He was also the one who seemed to observe everything, who rarely complained, and who had a quiet generosity about him. "You think Presley did it?" Private Jenkins whispered to Miller one afternoon as Elvis walked by, heading for his bunk. Miller shrugged. "Could be. He's got the dough, but he acts just like one of us. Why wouldn't he say anything?" Elvis, overhearing bits and pieces of these conversations, would just offer a small, innocent shrug or a non-committal answer. "Beats me. Fellas, maybe they just had a change of heart at HQ." He tried his best to deflect, to keep the mystery alive. Sergeant Davies, bless his stoic heart, played along perfectly, always saying, "Official Army business, boys, don't ask questions you don't want the answers to." Despite his efforts at anonymity, A quiet, unspoken gratitude began to settle over the barracks. Even if they weren't sure who had done it, the effect was undeniable. Morale soared. The common rooms became gathering places, centers of community. Soldiers who rarely interacted found themselves bonding over shared TV shows, debating plots, or simply enjoying the company. "Whoever did this, they're a hero," Private Martinez said one night, his voice soft with emotion. "It's not just about the TV, it's about someone caring enough to make our lives a little better, you know?" Elvis, pretending to read a letter from home, felt a lump form in his throat. This was the real reward. Hearing their genuine appreciation, seeing the positive impact on their spirits, far outweighed any public recognition. He saw soldiers calling home, excitedly, telling their families about the new miracle TVs. He saw weary faces light up, shoulders relax. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of drills, Elvis found himself sitting among a small group, watching a movie. The picture was perfect, the sound clear. No one complained. No one had to thump the side of the set. It was just easy, comfortable viewing. He watched the faces around him. Illuminated by the screen's glow, they looked less like tired soldiers and more like young men enjoying a simple pleasure. Far from the pressures of their duty, he felt a deep, abiding warmth spread through him. This was what money was for, he realized. Not just for buying things for himself or for show, but for bringing comfort, joy, and a sense of shared humanity to others. This simple act of generosity, born from empathy and carried out in secret, felt more fulfilling than any roaring crowd or #1 hit. He was just Elvis, a soldier, and he had given his brothers in arms a little piece of home, and their quiet, unspoken gratitude was the most precious payment of all. It's hard to keep a secret in the Army, especially one as big and as beneficial as 3 brand-new top-of-the-line televisions. The whispers about Elvis Presley grew louder, more insistent. His attempts at deflection became less convincing, and Sergeant Davies' stoic silence only fueled the suspicion. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place a few weeks later. Private Miller, a naturally curious sort, happened to be in the supply office, picking up some fresh laundry soap, when he overheard a low conversation between Sergeant Davies and Herr Lorenz. The German electronics shop owner, Lorenz, was delivering a small, specialized part for one of the TVs. A spare remote control, perhaps. "Tell Private Presley I appreciate his business," Herr Lorenz said in halting English, laughing. "The boys at barracks 104 and 105, they're very happy with the television, best thing to happen." Davies, usually so careful, just chuckled, nodding. "He's a good kid, that Presley, got a generous heart." Miller froze, laundry soap forgotten, his eyes widened. Presley, he did it. The confirmation hit him like a lightning bolt. He excused himself, heart pounding, and practically ran back to the barracks. The news spread like wildfire. First among the inner circle of Miller, Johnson, and Jenkins, then to the entire barracks. It was an angry, frustrated gossip. It was amazed, grateful, almost reverent. That evening, after lights out, a group of soldiers led by Sergeant Davies, who had clearly decided the secret had run its course, quietly gathered around Elvis's bunk. Elvis was trying to read a letter from his girlfriend Priscilla when he noticed the unusual silence. Then the collective gaze. He looked up, feigning innocence. "Everything all right, fellas?" Private Johnson, usually quick with a joke, cleared his throat awkwardly. "Presley, we know." Elvis raised an eyebrow. "Know what?" Corporal Schmidt stepped forward, his expression serious, but with a softening around his eyes. "The TV's Elvis. We know it was you," Miller overheard Davies and Herr Lorenz. A quiet gasp went around the small group. Elvis sighed, a small, weary smile on his face. "All right, you got me." He put down his letter. "But you weren't supposed to know." "Why not?" Jenkins asked, his voice full of wonder. "Why wouldn't you want us to know? You spent all that money." Elvis looked around at their faces, illuminated by the soft glow of the barracks nightlights. He saw genuine curiosity, gratitude and a hint of almost awe. "'Cause it wasn't about that," he said, his voice low, earnest. "It wasn't about me getting credit. It was about you guys. About making things a little easier, a little brighter, while we're all stuck out here," he continued, choosing his words carefully. "I saw how much that old TV frustrated everyone. How you guys just wanted a bit of home, a bit of normal. And I had the means, my army salary." The men stared at him, not as a rock and roll star, but as a genuine, caring human being. It was a profound moment of connection. Then Private Miller, usually cynical, spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "Elvis, that's the kindest thing anyone's done for us since we got here. Seriously, you didn't have to." "But he did," Corporal Schmidt added, a rare softness in his tone. "He did, and we're grateful, Presley, more than you know." One by one, the soldiers mumbled their thanks, some just nodding, others reaching out to lightly pat his shoulder. It wasn't the roaring applause he was used to, but it was far more meaningful. It was the quiet, heartfelt appreciation of men who truly understood the gesture. Elvis felt a lump in his throat. The money was gone, but in its place he had gained something invaluable: the genuine respect, gratitude, and brotherhood of his fellow soldiers. He was no longer just a celebrity in their midst. He was truly one of them, a brother who had looked out for his own. And in that moment he realized the true meaning of his time in the Army. It wasn't just about serving his country. It was about serving his comrades in ways big and small. The truth about the TV solidified Elvis Presley's place in Barracks 104, not as a celebrity doing a good deed, but as a brother who cared deeply for his comrades. The initial awe faded, replaced by a deep-seated respect and genuine affection. He was still Elvis, yes, but he was also Presley, their Presley, the generous, humble guy who looked out for his own. The atmosphere in the barracks had undergone a complete transformation. The recreation rooms, now boasting crystal clear, vibrant television screens, became the heart of their communal life. Movie nights were a regular occurrence, with soldiers taking turns picking films. News broadcasts were watched with renewed interest, and even the daily grind of Army life felt a little less burdensome, knowing that an evening of entertainment awaited. The TVs became symbols, not just of entertainment, but of the unexpected kindness that could exist even in the rigorous world of military service. They were a constant reminder that someone, their own comrade, had put their comfort above his own without seeking recognition. "Hey, Presley," Private Johnson would call out sometimes, jokingly. "Think you can get us a new pool table next?" But the joke always ended with a warm smile and a pat on Elvis's back, a silent acknowledgement of his generosity. Elvis, in turn, found himself more deeply integrated into the barracks life than ever before. He joined them in their movie nights, sharing popcorn and laughter. He listened to their stories, offered quiet advice, and became a true confidant for many. The walls of fame and celebrity that had once seemed to separate him from them crumbled completely. He was just another guy, pulling his weight, doing his duty, and making friends. His Army experience, which had started with a desire to prove himself to be seen as a regular soldier, had given him something far more profound. He learned the meaning of brotherhood, of shared sacrifice, and the quiet power of a selfless act. He saw how a seemingly small gesture given from the heart could have an enormous impact on the morale and well-being of an entire group. Sergeant Davies, who remained his silent co-conspirator, would often give Elvis a knowing look, a small nod of approval that spoke volumes. He understood the impact of Elvis's actions not just on the soldiers, but on the overall spirit of the barracks. As the weeks and months passed, the TVs continued to serve their purpose, bringing countless hours of comfort and entertainment. They were more than just electronics. They were a testament to the bond that formed between these young men, far from home, facing the world together. When Elvis's time in the Army eventually came to an end, and he prepared to return to his world of screaming fans and flashing cameras, the farewells in Barracks 104 were different than he might have expected. There were no demands for autographs, no pleas for special favors. Instead, there were heartfelt handshakes, strong embraces, and genuine wishes of good luck. "Thanks for everything, Elvis," Private Miller said, his voice thick. "Not just the TVs, but everything." "Yeah," Private Jenkins added, "you were a good bunkmate, Presley." "Best we ever had." Elvis looked at their faces, these men who had been his family for the past 2 years. He had given them comfort, but they had given him something far more valuable, a sense of belonging, a grounding in reality, and a profound lesson in true human connection. He left the barracks, not as a king returning to his throne, but as a soldier who had completed his tour of duty, carrying with him memories that transcended fame and fortune. The money he had spent on those TVs was long gone, but the happiness it had brought and the genuine brotherhood it had cemented would stay with him forever. It was, he realized, the best investment he had ever made.